And of course, we push that. Why are rainforests destroyed? Again, just one example of this one causeway into the rivulet of the perfect storm of extinction. We play a role in that. For example, if you were to go to Sumatra, Sumatra is home to incredible rainforests from that documentary I did based on a book I wrote called 100 Heartbeats. Orangutans, rhinos, elephants, all the animals of Sumatra will be gone 10 years from now because all the forest will be gone. Not just because the people of Sumatra are cutting down that forest, by the way, releasing 700 billion tons of carbon locked up in dry and rainforest and in peat forest, but we're a part of that too. Does anyone know what we do that contributes to the deforestation in Sumatra?
Use
Coffee.
paper.
We buy it.
Palm oil. 1 out of every 10 products we use, actually this is beeswax though, but many chapsticks and other things contain palm oil, cosmetics, foods, stabilizers, and ice cream. So I only tell you that because that just shows you we're all a part of that. And of course when we lose a species, we lose it forever. But the truth is, we have great examples of us stepping up and saving species. You could look right to Tennessee. You could look to bald eagles. Many of you in this room are under 30. Anyone here who's over 30? Who's like me, 31? Well, if you're like me and you're in your 40s, you can look back at your youth, and if you lived in Tennessee, you didn't see bald eagles. Today you see bald eagles. Bald eagles were reduced to only 450 pair in the lower 48. And today there are over 10,000, which is a great example of how, when we want to, we can step up and save life. And we need to, because the world we use and rely on today is in serious jeopardy. So at that point, what I would love to do is open it up to the floor. I think we have a book signing afterwards, but before we get to that, I'd love to answer any of your questions that you have. By the way, I do tweet. I am Jeff Corwin at Twitter, and we're launching a big interactive site called Jeff Corwin Connect, but you can see that on the Facebook stuff if you want. My daughter was like, do a lot of people have Facebook? I'm like, I think so. I don't understand it. Any questions I can answer? No questions at all? Yes, sir. What got me started in the work that I do? Well, you know, I've had television shows on now for going on 15 years. We've had over 9 different series, but in my heart I'm a naturalist. I love nature, and I love to take moments of nature and get people excited about them, specifically when it comes to issues of conservation. And I remember that distinct moment. I was about 6 years old. I was a little city kid. My dad was a Boston police officer. My mom was a nurse. And we used to go visit my grandparents that lived in the country. And I was there in the backyard. And for me, nature was like my sanctuary. And I saw this thing I never saw before. It was about this long. It was legless, and it was scaly. And my heart was just beating right out of my chest. And it seemed like the moment I discovered it, it disappeared. It just melted into the wood till it was almost gone. I just disheveled that wood pile till there it was, this snake. And I reached out, and I grabbed onto it. It reached back and grabbed onto me. Luckily, it was a garter snake. And I remember my grandmother seeing this thing hang from my arm, and she said, "Get rid of it." And I went, "No." And she said, "Why not?" I was, "Because I love it." Get it off my arm. And I often think if I had been like a guitar player or something, a musician, I found a guitar there, maybe I'd have been a rock star. Or I was if I found a golf club there, maybe it'd have been a Tiger Woods or a serial killer or something. I found a snake. And that for me was the moment. I remember that moment. That was the day I became a naturalist. The day I focused in on conservation was a distinctly different day. It was 2 years later, that very same snake, watching that snake. So that was my road into nature, and then watching literally the neighbor from next door cut its head off. And was mortified by that and realized that good people make bad decisions because they don't have information. And that was the moment I would use whatever, either writing books, which I've done, or television and stuff. And right now, you know, I love working with Embassy. I have a big story coming up. You should care about this in Tennessee. It's on white nose syndrome, which is wiping out our country's bats. The little brown bat, it's a story, hopefully it'll be on this week or next week. And we basically looked at the plight of our bats. Bats are very important. Bats are important in agriculture. 50% of every plant living in the Sonora Desert relies on bats for seed dispersal or pollination. One colony of bats can eat 450 dump trucks worth of mosquitoes in a year, and one bat, little brown bat, can consume more than 2,000 mosquito-like insects. So very important to agriculture, our survival, because of disease like Eastern equine encephalitis. The little brown bat was once North America's most abundant species of mammal. And we went to a cave that in 2008, 2 years ago, in Vermont, had 350,000 bats. And when we went in there a few weeks ago, only 24 had survived. And I remember this eerie thing, seeing this pathetic cluster of bats. And then thinking what I thought was this carpet of 3-inch pine needles. And it was just 2 years of bones from an entire generation of lost bats making up the cave floor. That has jumped from those caves to now showing up in Iowa, and people believe it will drive many bats to extinction. It's very tragic. So there's that story coming out. Yes, anyone? Any other questions? Yes. What did I major in college? I have a bachelor's degree in biology. I have a bachelor's degree in anthropology. My graduate work and degree is in conservation biology and wildlife management. I actually did my graduate work on bats. And I did a lot of stuff on snakes. I always did snake stuff too. But I couldn't get a fellowship on snakes. I got invited to bats. So yeah. Well, one species was a species of bird in Hawaii. I remember going all the ways to this island retreat off of Maui and seeing this rather innocuous, boring bird, which sang beautifully. His beauty made up for his rather innocuous appearance. I remember just seeing him on a branch, singing out, and I looked at the guy and I said, "What's the big deal about this?" And he went, "It's the last one." And every day he sings on his perch into the forest, and the call never returns. And then one day he didn't sing, he went in, he was at the bottom of the cage dead. Died from malaria. Malaria, which was brought over by colonists in the 18th century, which spread throughout Hawaii when the mosquitoes spread from the introduction of feral pigs. You know what pigs do to landscape around here, right? That frog in that video, the harlequin frog, that frog, we found the last one alive in the wild, which is now part of a breeding program in captivity. And that frog, with all the other frogs on our planet, are disappearing because largely from a fungus called chytrid fungus, Batrachochytridium mycosis, which is wiping out many of our planet's amphibians. And when you see these indicator species, like bees and bats and amphibians, animals that have been around forever, when you see these normally stable populations just crash and collapse, that tells us that there are great issues with our environment. And there have been a number of species we've highlighted. But then one time we filmed the black-footed ferret. This was a species that became extinct. And they discovered a small colony. And out of that small colony, we now have 2,000 black-footed ferret living in the wild. Yes?